Hello, salam, and peace. This is your podcast, quote unquote, Black Woman Speaks Arabic, breaking the stereotypes and the stigmas around quote unquote Black women, Black Muslim women, and Black native Arabic speaking women. Today's topic is surrounding around self-worth, and I have a guest speaker who will introduce herself. She's an absolute treasure, and when you're ready, please reintroduce yourself. Tell us about your ethnic background, what your profession is, and how did your journey start?
Yes. Hi. So glad to be here with you, Master Diso. And I just have to say, I absolutely love that you do this podcast and you're breaking stereotypes, and it's so amazing. So my name is Bemene Piaro. I'm a transformational life coach. I am Black, originally from Nigeria. So that's my ethnicity, if you will. And how my journey started. So my profession is life coaching, at least that is through my business, the Wholeness Center. And how that life coaching journey really started, it's really through my own experience of being coached. So I was not introduced to life coaching until 2017. And I was introduced to it, of all things, while I was traveling in Europe, visiting a friend of mine from college. And it took me being in another country for a white woman to tell me about coaching.
And then we shall resume. Fasil Thumma Nawasal, your podcast, quote unquote, Black Woman Speaks Arabic, is part and parcel of my projects, Binta Hawa Designs, a healing journey on designs, and Binta Hawa Arabic, a Black woman's companion at the start of her Arabic learning journey. If you'd like to know more about how to create your own Afro-Arabic design, learn how to speak like an Egyptian, or MSA, then reach out to me in the detail box below. My name is Matsadiso, and I'm a TCK, and Arabic happens to be my second.
Right. So this is not something that I was exposed to at all as a Black person. And at that time, a younger Black person struggling financially. So I'm just going to say a poor Black person. And it was not part of kind of anything I was exposed to. So it took someone else from another country to tell me about this opportunity to receive coaching at a time that I really needed it. And it changed my life. It did. I feel like this whole new chapter of my life has been since then. And just seeing how powerful that is, I ultimately decided to go into it myself. But I think sometimes you have to hear things a couple of times. So it took another instance of my day job. I ended up getting a job with an organization that does a combination of executive coaching and training for nonprofits, leaders. And I was like, oh, I really like this. Let me enroll in the coaching program. I really like the coaching, not so much wanting to be a nonprofit expert. So I just it just became more clear what about it I wanted for myself. And it was that relationship, transformational coaching experience, one-on-one with a client or with a group, about that whole person that intrigued me the most. So that's how I ended up here.
Wow. It really does take a big why and a personal experience I've noticed that there's a common pattern when we tend to have a message where we want to serve others. It usually starts from a personal experience and a personal need, to go down a particular journey. So what challenges do you feel that you had to overcome as a Black woman to get to where you are now and reach the stage where you are capable of transforming, making transformation within the lives of your clients?
Thank you. That's such a great question. I think for me, and I imagine for a lot of people, the ongoing challenge, I would say I'm better now, and I'm still working with it. And it comes up, right? Because I'm essentially an entrepreneur building a business. So this still comes up. But the challenge for me is just internalized beliefs of limitation, right? feeling like, am I good enough to do this? Am I good enough to be a life coach? Am I good enough to run my own business? Do I make it good enough grades when I was a student? Am I, looking at my resume, I'm getting ready to apply for that job, and I have all this skill sets except for this one or two things that was mentioned. And all of a sudden it's like, oh no, am I good enough? And having that kind of like negative self-talk is a huge limiter. And I think one of the journeys, I have like a really key story for this for me, because I feel like I spent a lot of time arguing for my limitations, but not realizing I was doing so. And I think it was not a conscious thing, but I would be like, no, I can't do that. And I would have all the reasons why I cannot do it. And it made very logical sense. And I did not realize this was due to like this whole internalized, kind of sense that I had of not being worthy of all the things that I wanted. And the story that I really remember from when I became aware of this fact was really like actually when I was getting my master's in public health, of all things. I was writing my thesis, struggling with it. I was a semester later than I wanted to graduate, despite the fact that, when it comes to graduate school, it really is on your own timeline. Of course, it costs you money, but it's on your own timeline. But for me, there was the pride thing around finishing at this time with all my peers, this comparison. And so I was like, having all the negative self-talk, judging myself. I had real data, which was amazing, but sometimes I was like, no, it's not amazing. All this self-talk. And then I found a box that one of my communities that raised me, and I was essentially a community project. Long story, we'll talk about that another time. But a box that one of those women gave me, and it had in it all these things from high school, like awards that I'd received, notes from my teachers to my parents saying, hey, take Bemene out to ice cream. She did great, or she got an honor roll, like all these things. And I'm telling you, I started crying because I did not, I was there, I did those things. I know I went to award ceremonies, but it still was not part of the story I was telling myself about who I was. Still not good enough. All of those, it was just kind of like, oh, if they gave it to me, it must not be that good kind of thing. I wasn't consciously thinking it, but I think I was feeling it. I was not registering like the positives of what I was accomplishing. And I was just in that moment of struggling, having my crisis, trying to write my thesis, judging myself. I started looking at all these notes, and I was just like, who is this person? And how did I not know? Right? Like, I'm like, I was there when this happened. How did I not know that I was this person? So, and so that always sticks with me, like to remember that, like whatever limiting beliefs that I'm having, that they're just thoughts and they're not true. Because if I could not realize this thing for so many years, right? This was high school versus like I'd gone to college. I was at the end of graduate school. So many years without seeing this truth of my true self-worthiness. I have to, so it just kind of always reminds me to remember that, like the limiting beliefs are just that. So that's been like, and it's still a challenge, like I said, but I always have that reminder to bring me back to it. Yeah.
Thank you. So many life lessons that add richness to what you have to offer. I mean, it takes, for example, I'm a mother, and when I talk to another mother, they know exactly what a mother goes through. And so it's like it takes a mother to know one, but you've gone through your own experiences and challenges yourself. And so you know exactly what your client goes through versus reading something from a textbook and knowing off by heart, passing an exam and saying, oh yeah, I know what you're experiencing, but really it's just off of the paper, but you've experienced it firsthand. So that brings me off to another question, which is, how do you, from your observations, how do you feel the lack of sense of self-worth or confidence how does it show up in Black women? How do you find it manifests itself?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think what I shared is just one example, right? Like for me, it's like not even being aware that I'm constantly trying to prove myself, right? Like I was needing to prove to others and to myself that I was worthy, even without realizing it. Like I was discounting my achievements, and constantly feeling like I had to work harder. I had to accomplish. There's this mountaintop that I would reach, and then I would be worthy. So that's like one way. I think it can show up in a lot of ways. I was reading a research kind of like qualitative research that somebody else did and shared on the International Coaching Federation page, where they were just talking about speaking with a bunch of Black women. And the theme that came out of that, one of those themes was like, there was constantly this like goals, right? And I can do it all by myself, and I always have to accomplish the next thing. So that's kind of what that brings to mind. I think that is a big one. I think that is pretty huge, of like, again, constantly feeling like I have to do something, I have to earn something, I have to prove something. And I think the goal to me is to get to the point where it's like, I don't have to prove anything. I really can do this. If I want to do it, I can do it. I have that capacity. I have the capacity to learn. I don't actually have to show up already perfect. It is okay to not only be imperfect, but to make mistakes and to be vulnerable. And I think that's something that it takes a strong sense of like, I am worthy no matter what, to be able to allow yourself to make those mistakes and learn from them, and not think that all of a sudden you will no longer be loved and you will be punished and all these other things.
Love that, to have the sense of self-worth no matter what. So what would you say, how is self-worth formed? Where does it emerge from? How is it shaped? What influences it? What fashions it? And is it inherent or is it acquired?
Yeah, that question just makes me take a really deep breath.
Go ahead, go for it. Breathe.
There's so much there, yes. I absolutely believe that it's inherent. We are born with it. We're worthy just by the virtue of the fact that we're here. We would not be here unless we're meant to be here. And the way we showed up here has everything to do with what it is we want to learn and achieve and accomplish here on this earth. So those are the sources or tools, if you will, for us to use and work through to get to where we are. So my personal belief is, yes, we're absolutely all inherently worthy. Something that comes to mind for me when I think of that is I think about being back in Nigeria, being a child in the village. And I remember that sense of like security that I had being in community with all my aunts and uncles and grandmother and father. And my father traveled a lot and he brought us gifts. And I remember he brought me like this slipper. And I just remember wearing it and telling my friends, I am loved. My father loves me so much. He got me these shoes. Look how great it is. I just being so confident and showing up. And I remember that feeling like no one could tell me that I was not worthy. No one could tell me, like, it just didn't even occur to me. And I really feel like that is kind of how we are naturally. I don't think that anyone is born thinking that they're less than. I think that message. So I think self-worth is inherent, and it's, but what happens is as we experience things in life, for me, it was all the constant moving around, being in this country, going through assimilation, all of the messages you get being a Black bodied person in the US that kind of start telling you, oh, you're not good enough, or all these other things. So like we can forget and lose touch with that inherent self-worthiness, but it's always there. Period. We don't become less worthy because things happen to us. We just maybe stop knowing that we're worthy as we kind of take in the messaging that comes from our environment. That's my personal belief anyway.
Right. Thank you. So in your journey on your way to being a transformational life coach, naturally, some people tend to gravitate towards you and what you have to offer. So the clients that you feel are taking on your service, do you feel that they are of a particular ethnic background? And if they are, do you think that there's any particular reason why?
Yeah, so I intentionally, my intention is to serve Black people, particularly Black women. Of course, I feel like every coaching experience starts with a consultation and a conversation, and in that conversation is somewhat of a chemistry check to see, am I the right coach for my client, and are they the right client for me? But the reason why my intention is to serve Black women is, one, I am a Black woman. Two, as I was saying at the very beginning, I did not even know of this resource, right? Like, being a Black person of a certain class, it wasn't something I was naturally exposed to. That may have changed. 2017 is long ago, but maybe not that long ago. But things are probably shifting. They're definitely probably more Black coaches now. But even in that time, my coach was a white person. And I actually remember kind of wishing I had a Black coach. And she was amazing. I stayed with her off and on for 3 years. She was really amazing. But I would tell you, when 2020 happened in the US and there was the racial uprisings happening, the fact that she was white for me became an issue, not because she was a bad coach, but because I was all of a sudden was very conscious of like what because like I was dealing with a lot of things around race, a lot of anger. I call myself a recovering activist, because sometimes you need to take a break from activism. But I was in that space where those were the things I needed to work through. And talking to someone who was white across from me, who I was not really sure of their experience, or like if they would call themselves an ally or not, that all became something that impacted the space for me and kind of detracted from the psychological safety. So I think the piece in it for me of like giving Black people that option of having a coach that looks like them, if that's something that's important to them, that they can reasonably assume shares certain experiences.
Definitely. So how would your coaching help women with mental health issues, if at all, and what kind?
Yeah, so this is a huge one. I think one of the biggest difference between like coaching and therapy is that coaching is a peer relationship between two people who are clean, like I'm using, when I say healthy, I mean clinically, mentally healthy. So not to say that there is not actually necessarily an active mental health disorder in place, or if there is, that the client already has a therapist or is already managing that, because coaches are not necessarily trained. And if they were trained as such, then they would probably have the therapy background, but they're not trained to manage mental health illnesses. So that's the first thing. And then another big difference is that coaching is really focused on the present and getting to what you want for the future. Whereas in like therapy, oftentimes is focused on the past and getting to understand how the past got you to the present. So it's very different, and it changes kind of how you deal with things. Again, coaches are so different. It's in the US, it's not very strictly regulated. So there may be coaches that deal with trauma, but if I had a client that really did have actual clinical trauma, I would recommend them to go talk to a therapist. So I say all of that to say, I would not be in a space to manage actual mental health illnesses. But what I offer as a coach is someone who is there to hold space and create a safe space to explore an issue and make goals and take action steps towards achieving those goals and provide that supportive accountability. So it's very much about asking powerful questions and have the person that has the ability to entertain those questions and be honest with themselves and the answer and with me, and be able to say those things out loud so that they can start to kind of loosen its hold on them, and to then make that conscious decision about, okay, this may have been true to this point, or it's and what do I want to shift to? What do I want to do now? And then make those decisions and just something about that accompaniment and that connection and that safe space that gives you that sense that, yes, I can do it and I can get to it. And we're going to break it down really small so I know exactly what I'm doing between now and the next time. And even if I don't accomplish all of it, I can come back. We can talk about what didn't quite go and what did go, and there's even more growth and lessons from that. So peers, both healthy, because healthy does not mean the absence of illness to me, but like those things that require management are being managed, and then like goal oriented and focused, if that makes any difference. I mean, if that makes any difference, but if that makes any sense, sorry.
You've been understood, no worries. So there's a clear distinction there between a therapist, the role of a therapist, and a coach. So what about mindfulness? What is mindfulness, and do you incorporate that into your services? And if you do, how does it help them?
Yeah. So this question to me, like, I'm like, mindfulness to me, when I'm coaching, I'm practicing mindfulness. And my personal practice of mindfulness is something like, for me, it's meditation. It's sitting down. I could meditate for an hour. Doesn't mean I'm actually doing the thing of staying focused and in the present moment for that hour, but I could certainly sit for an hour and achieve some of that time being focused in the moment. That's how meditation works for me. It's also maybe going out in nature and walking. So that's my mindfulness practice. But I think the bigger thing about mindfulness, I think the underlying thing is the being in the present moment, is being truly aware, of your experiences, whether that's your bodily sensations, your breath, sometimes your thoughts, but like as an observer. Right. So you kind of take a step back from being the experiencer to like, what am I experiencing, and how can I, and becoming aware of that. And what that does is create that level of separation between you and the experience, so that you can make a conscious decision about what you want to do next. And for me, that's so important about getting you into the driver's seat of your own life, where you're not just being driven by your experiences, not just reacting to them, but you're making conscious decisions about where you want to get to. So for me, that is really the mindfulness piece, because then it translates like faith or religion to like more so like you can bring what your specific practice is, and that's fine, because my coaching is about centering the client's values. But I'm going to always help to kind of try to bring you back to awareness of what you're thinking, awareness of what you're feeling, what's underneath it, and what is happening in this present moment, here and now. Not the story you've repeated to yourself over and over, or the past, or even the future, but like in this moment, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It kind of reminds me of something that I heard that really help put things into perspective, and like you said, kind of like separate yourself from the experience. And that is, and I do that with my children now, and with a simple emotion, because in the children's books of feelings, it has, like, for example, with happy, like, I'm happy. And so I tell my son, no, say, I feel happy, because I'm, it's like taking on the label, and you're identifying with, like, you are happy, but there is happiness in me. I'm angry. So I'm saying I'm angry. So there is anger in me, or I feel anger. So that what you said, it really, really puts things into perspective, and it really reiterates how I've strongly felt in correcting my children when they're expressing or trying to express how they feel, because they're still navigating. Well, us adults, we're navigating as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't need people like you. So.
Right? I love that, though. I really love that. Like, teaching your kids mindfulness. You're like, you are a person. There is someone in there that is feeling these things. Right. If so like, let's start realizing that I have these things. I'm feeling this thing, but there is a me. There is a me outside of those things I'm feeling. There is a me outside of whatever label. Right. And so like starting to like understand that, hey, I may feel this thing, I may experience that, but who is experiencing that? That's actually who I am. It's not the experiences. It's the who that is experiencing those things. I love that you're doing that so early on with parenting.
I didn't know that was mindfulness. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, thank you. Right, so that brings me to the last part of the podcast. I can't let you go without you dropping off some nuggets, some more gold nuggets. So for a black-bodied person who is from the African diaspora, someone who is a TCK, who wishes to follow into your footsteps as a transformational life coach, what advice would you give them? It's a whole new transition, going into another country, being brought up in that country. What advice would you give them before she takes that first step?
You know, like as you were saying that, the thing that came to me right off the bat is kind of what you said in the very beginning. It's like having the why. That's really the most important thing, right? Like if you want to, you'll know, right? Like there will be a why. And so the steps are, you know, depending, right? Like you could always just start your own coaching business. It's not highly regulated in the US. If you have a message or story you want to deliver, you could certainly just start it. But for me, it's what I like most about coaching is that it is a partnership with the other person, and the other person, the client, is the expert in their own experience, and they are the drivers. And then, so that requires a particular training. So there is, it's essentially called peer coaching. So for me, it was significant and important to go get the training on like how to ask those powerful questions. What is the structure of coaching like? Just so that I can make sure that I was being good space for my clients, though it's not required. But so, you know, it's quite a few number of hours. I've done it in a year. Some people do it in 6 months. Some people do it longer than that. So I think having that strong why, that like, why do I want to coach, helps to go through that. But there's so much benefit in it. Like going through the process of becoming a coach, you get to be coached and coach your peers, and you learn from that experience. There's so much self-discovery about it, and then learning how to really hold that space for others. There's so much benefit. You use that in your own personal life. It impacts your friendships and your relationships and yourself, because you can coach yourself. You can hold that space for yourself. You can do it through journaling, right? You kind of start to think a certain kind of way and ask certain questions about things. So there's so much benefit. But I think the most important first step is like, is this something I really want to do? Right? Like start with experiencing it. I guess that's where to start. Start with getting coached. And if that's like, oh my God, I love that. I want to know how to do that.
I want that for others.
Then you ask your coach, hey, how did you get there? And they'll tell you their experience, and you can start that way. Or like, I mean, Google will give you so many different starting points.
All right. Thank you so much, Bemene, for joining us. It's been a treat having you, and I love your gems, and I'm sure the listeners will too. And that's the end of the podcast, Self-Worth, Mindfulness, and Transformation. If you'd like to get in touch with Bemene and her services, I'll leave the details for you in the details below. Thank you, and ma'asalama. Bye.
Thank you.